All right, ladies and gentlemen, Functional Pat in the building. What's up, my brother?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. Basically, met Pat in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We do Human Foundations course through functional patterns. For me, that was incredibly enlightening. It was just, you think that it's the same thing with a lot of different things. You think that you're doing it well, or you really don't think about it at all. Most people think they walk okay. They think they're walking pretty well. They think that they're standing good, that their posture is okay. And it really takes someone who knows what they're talking about to put you in front of a mirror and then let you see it.
Yeah, at that time, I couldn't be in a good position. So whenever I was standing in front of the mirror, like, I don't know, everyone was just, one of the really cool things was we had people like in the industry and you'd look around and everyone was a different shape. And like, the first day I like didn't know what was up, what way was up. Like you said, I thought I knew something or I didn't really think about it at all.
And you
We
had
were
meant,
talking about that last.
yeah, you had mentioned that what brought you there was an injury. So if you could just talk a little bit about that. And we were kind of theorizing that maybe it takes some kind of catastrophe to get people to value functionality. Now, though,
Yeah.
I've spoken to a few people who had no injuries and still went through with it. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wish that was what it took for me. But the thing that brought me to functional patterns, I had been a college athlete. I had a pretty extensive injury history, but nothing that I like was truly concerned about. I was like, it's just the cost of playing
It
sports
just
or
seems like normal
training at a
stuff,
high
right?
level.
You sprain your
Yeah,
ankle, this, that.
it's normalized. Yeah.
Yeah, because everybody's in pain, bro.
Territory.
Everybody's knees
Yeah.
hurt. Everybody sprained their ankle a few times. Like, everybody has something going on.
Yo, in the normalization of it, here's one of those metaphors. It's like you're standing in a building with a fire alarm going off all the time, getting doused by water. When you feel that pain and you just ignore it, we're like standing in a building where the fire alarm's going off all the time.
You know, man,
And I don't understand how I let myself get to that point.
that's a good
But
point, man.
go ahead.
That's a good point, man. Like, the complacency with the pain, because it gets normalized like that, people may not know that there's another way, and they end up just being okay with it, letting it rock. And that's how it was
Yeah.
for me, dude. I let it rock for a while.
Yeah, I did. And that's so like, I did all the way through my sports. I was like lifting weights real hard. I thought I was doing everything I could to stay out of pain. But like took a couple years of sports off after college, went into the workforce. I was out in Seattle, and my back started hurting just sitting in the chair all the time. And you know, I can't believe I cannot believe that like functional patterns headquarters just kind of fell in my lap. I just Googled something like biomechanics Seattle, and I don't know what I was expecting to find, but like functional patterns was probably like absolutely the best thing I could have found.
Yeah.
So I went there, didn't know what I'd found. Trained with Andrea for 10 sessions, and still didn't really understand what I was doing. I asked her like, what kind of weightlifting can I still do? And she's like, you shouldn't do any of that. And unfortunately, I still kind of dabbled with a bunch of other stuff for the next 2 years until we had our Human Foundations course. And after I felt, after I felt that.
It's a good point, man, because we start off, right? And we're introduced to the idea. And it's like, when I was taking the 10-week course, in my head, I still wanted to do shit that wasn't really helping me. I still wanted to do all the bar calisthenic stuff. And it's interesting how over time, once you start to see the results, you're like, okay, I don't need to do that because this is what's making me feel good. But back then, I guess something about that was attractive to me or made me feel good.
Yeah, and I even went through it in a different, like on another, in another context after the thing. So I had quit my job in like June of 2018, and I was just going to get back to training for track and field, and that's what I was doing. It was going well. But like, it came around time for competition, and I would get into that like sympathetic state. And
Yeah.
a lot of my old habits would come back. I was definitely better than I used to be,
Hmm.
but I had a degenerated enough gait to where I was still like in pain for a couple of days after I would jump in a competition.
And you had a crazy incident with the long jump too, right? I think you told me like your jaw came out of place or something.
Oh yeah. So back in high school, that stuff that would happen like every fourth or fifth event
Wow.
or attempt. Okay, yeah. So like, let me just rewind. My history with weightlifting started track my junior year. Didn't lift weights. Started lifting weights my senior year. And like I started getting all these really weird like symptoms. I guess my knees were hurting. That was normal though. Like
Right,
you jump,
sure.
your knees are gonna got jumper's knee. You got jumper's knee. They get knee pains.
They give it that name, huh?
Splints.
Nice.
Yeah. They like you build it into the psyche. It's stupid.
It's into the culture, bro, straight up.
Yeah, right into the culture. So, and another one that was just super weird was I'd be running down the runway and my jaw would pop out of place, and like I couldn't open my mouth. I have to like.
You have to take a second to like get it back in place.
Get that stuff out. Yeah, and like I've been, I don't know. I wore like a mouth guard for grinding my teeth, so I knew that something was already wrong up there. But
Interesting.
When that started happening, I don't know.
So something
I couldn't even imagine what the cause was.
Something interesting you said, man, is like when the sympathetic response would kick in, that you're nervous before a competition, then you start to see that your biomechanics are getting worse, or that you're going back to the old patterns because you can't handle the stress. And even possibly, you know, one of the more fascinating things that I had read out of, it's Fascia, the Tensile Network of the Human Body is the name of the book.
Yeah.
The correlation between hyperflacidity and anxiety is very, very strong. And now that I think about it, dude, I would freeze up in some competitions too. And in my head, I was like, how come I can't do it as good as I do it at the other time, you know? And I wonder if part of that is just like your structure is more vulnerable to anxiety if you're not as stable.
Yeah, I believe that. And it's also kind of like that chicken or egg, because you talk about like the neuromyofascial network, and now you're talking about like the direct reshaping of your fascia in response to your like localized emotions, like the local emotions of a body part. When I think about that, I'm like, I don't even know what I've gotten myself into. I don't even know. Like this game is so fun. It's so fun.
It is, man. It's
like now I have the same deal where I was this past like off season of training was really like exciting and really frustrating because I was jumping farther than I had in college by like a foot, in some cases a foot and a half. Like nothing. Wow. It wasn't official, obviously. It wasn't a competition.
Sure.
But
you know what happened.
I was just like I was like kind of in awe of what I was doing. And then I would get in the competition and I would jump about what I was doing in college. And I was like, what the heck?
Wow.
What the heck happened? But it's yeah. And those practices with the big jumps never came with injuries, but the competitions with the shorter jumps, they did. Like my knee or my Achilles tendon would get real sore.
Yeah.
I only did a few this past season, but then the whole COVID thing happened.
That's really interesting, bro. So we're thinking the stress response is involved in this too.
Oh yeah, it's like the same thing.
So a second ago, I mentioned hyperflacidity. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Oh yeah, I stretched myself into. I'm still a noodle in a lot of parts of my body. Like, do you ever use one of those power plates, the vibrating like platforms? You ever seen?
No,
those?
I haven't gotten to use one, but I know of them.
Okay, so like we got one at the college I was at, and I don't know, no one really used it. And I was like, I'll just stretch on it. So I made this stretching routine where I stretched every part of my lower body with the same like with no strategy. Like everything got the same. The quads, the hammies got the same.
Everything got the same love.
The calves. She got 1 minute of vibration on the plate.
That's good though,
I'm
man.
laughing because I think about how dumb it was to just, well, I'll just do that and see what happens. But I guess
Yeah,
that's learning.
I for sure stretch myself into this noodle state as well, the hyperflacidity. And just so people know, when you're holding a stretch for a long time like that, you're basically killing the elastic recoil that's supposed to exist in your muscles and in your movement.
Yeah.
If you stretch your fascia for a prolonged period of time, it gets that plastic deformation. So you could think about taking a plastic bag and stretching it slowly, holding it for a second. It's not going to go back to normal. Fortunately for us, your fascia can go back to normal given the proper stimuli.
Yeah.
But so
yeah, it's just that, like the properties of water, like us and our relationship to water, like that's where I don't know. That's where I believe my research and
yeah,
practice has led me to believe that like that I don't know, amorphousness of water is what lets us regenerate back towards the elastic state.
it makes sense, man. And you really do, you examine like a young person and an old person, and the main difference appears to be hydration. In fact,
Yeah.
you know, things start to kind of sag and fall off as you lose protein and get dehydrated. But it's a central piece of this. I just want really quickly to speak on dysfunction, right? So it's been difficult.
Sure.
So, and a second ago, you talk about the neuromyofascial web, and just so everyone knows, fascia is the connective tissue in our body. There's a lot of different versions of it. Long sheets, actual wrappings around each individual muscle fiber, and basically connects your organs, nerves, blood vessels, muscles, all into one piece. So you could say it's kind of like the core of your being. And this fascia has a nice pattern, man, a lattice pattern, a spiral, kind of like if something was stitched together. And it gives it that crimp where you can stretch it and it will rebound. But then at the same time, it adapts to the circumstances of our life, right? I like to say that your fascia basically is like the echoes of the movements you've done over the entirety of your life. So if you did some dumb shit like
it's
you and I did
Yep.
some dumb shit, we stretched our fascia out too much, became hyperflaccid. And that's one version of dysfunction that could happen. But I would like to speak more on dysfunction because it's kind of a nebulous term. You know, people have a difficult time understanding what that is.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, I guess dysfunction, I guess at least the way I've been thinking about it lately is it's the state that's caused by any stimulus that is not serving to like regenerate my vitality. That's still pretty nebulous,
Right.
but I guess it's more dysfunction. Like I don't know. I can look at a body part of mine that I know or I believe doesn't work right and call that dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It serves me better to just make dysfunction like the filter, like it helps with my decision tree on anything. So if I'm making a decision,
right,
like
the stimuli.
coffee's one that like a lot of functional patterns people make the decision on.
Right.
This is like not the functional behaviors like for hydration and for like
dude, I cannot tell you how many times in the last week I've thought to myself, like, this is some dysfunctional shit. Why am I doing this? It's a good lens to fit everything through.